This is the Lionel, will be known as the Lionel Richie Zoom session. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Deviance. Welcome back to sociology. I guess I'll say it, as many of you as would like. Unblock your cameras. It'd be fantastic to look into your eyes. I'm experiencing such different sociology between here and where I grew up in Illinois. Where I grew up in Illinois, if it was going to snow, or where I lived in Minnesota, people would still go out if there was a show or something. People wouldn't say buy all the groceries at the grocery store because they would know that the grocery store still exists. But wow, really interesting sociology out here in Colorado. Lines last night, with hundreds of people in line at grocery stores. And Julie said Vitamin Cottage was a wild place as well. So usually in Colorado, as the snow gets closer, the percentages and the amount goes down, right? And then finally it's like 2 little snowflakes and you're like, oh, 3 inches. But I was looking at Saturday going from 6 to 9 to 13 yesterday to 17 inches today on Wonderground. So who knows? What we're in store for. So I think it should be interesting. It's so weird because our pond is frozen, the ducks are in it, there's green grass, and we're gonna get shut down, which is good because we need so much moisture in this state. So just blanket our state with 20 feet of snow, as long as people are safe. But I have a feeling that the infrastructure in Colorado is going to do just fine with some snow. I really do believe that we are not going to see a repeat of what has happened in many places in the United States. All right. Any questions moving forward? Let me look at the chat here. Do you know how much Fort Collins is supposed to get? I heard 3 or 4 inches tomorrow, 5 the next day, or no, 3 or 4 inches tomorrow, 5 the next day, 13 or 16 or 17 on Saturday, 6 more inches on Sunday. And it just looked like for 4 days, it's going to be a lot. So yeah. So I had to take care of a bunch of stuff out here on the farm, which I did. All right, any questions? The exam is going to open up. Is that Thursday, Shelby? Can open up Thursday, and that will be open until Saturday, noonish or something like that. Did you just get a new piercing? Even if all of these squares were open, I would notice little things. Like in a classroom of 250 people, I would notice somebody laughing at their crotch while they were on their phone. Like that's how they look in a room full of 200 people. They just look down, look down, look down. And I'm even good at picking out the people that are smart enough to try and keep eye contact and engage while still on their phones. I was so good. I was so good at that. I haven't had a chance to do any of that this semester, or play music before the class super loud, or really see too many people changing their hair. Though I did notice that, I think, a couple days ago. So 2 feet. Don't know if that's true or not. I don't either. All right, let's get over here to some theoretical functions of deviance, some important stuff so that we could frame this. And then no class on Friday. And yeah, Friday's going to be like school on Sunday. No class, if you ever watched Fat Albert. All right. Durkheim and deviance definitely know the connection. And these are just some of Durkheim's basic insights, right? So from a structural functional point, like if you understand that structural functionalism is going to kind of support what's going on, and you know that conflict is going to point out the inequality, then you know that the up close picture is symbolic interaction, you kind of have an idea anyway ahead of time, right, of what's going to be going on. Durkheim's basic insight: deviance affirms cultural values and norms. So if somebody looks at you or recognizes your deviance or you're sanctioned in some way, that's a good thing, because it's going to tell us, just what we do accept and what we don't accept and how. So there can be no good without evil, no justice without crime, as an example. And therefore we know that. And furthermore, not only knowing it, but more importantly, like sharing that with other human beings in a given space and then responding to deviance, Durkheim is going to say that clarifies our moral boundaries, right? And basically the boundary between what is right and what is wrong. And then everywhere in between there, like we've been talking about, is, you know, moral judgment and difference and the other things that set it apart. Don't ask me what that individual is doing, but he's doing it on a stage at Lollapalooza. I don't know, maybe like a freak show. Anyway, responding to deviance brings people together. Meaning if we react, right, in a certain way together, collective outrage or whatever that might be, then it helps us, you know, to clarify our moral boundaries. And oftentimes, like, people react to serious deviance with shared outrage. It's impossible for me not to think about the riots on January 6th, because that's like a month ago, 2 months ago is all. And if I've ever seen an example of white privilege, if I've ever seen an example of deviance, I mean, I don't want to over process it, but there are so many things, you know, and people generally reacted to this deviant, super deviant business, right? Murder, and in the fashion and the type of property destruction and all sorts of things. And everybody was real mad about it. And then I think within the last 8 weeks, half of folks in our government have absolutely, or at least potentially half, forgotten about it altogether. So it's weird, because what I would think would be a shared focal point of moral outrage for quite some time, all of a sudden, right, can morph too. And that's based on how people respond or don't to it. It's not our only example, but there are just so many really interesting examples lately. Yeah. So deviance encourages social change. And perhaps deviance is a good thing, right? Because if we look at it from this point of view, then it pushes society's moral boundaries. I mean, is there going to be an anti-war movement? You know, if people don't burn their draft cards, is there going to, you know, there's so many of these important movements that start off, and from a functionalist standpoint, from Durkheim's standpoint, it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And in a literal way, people are saying to civil rights leaders, can't you just wait a little bit longer and we'll figure this all out? And then right. And of course, those people are like, no, we can't. You've already had a couple hundred years to figure it out. You're not doing it. So here we go. So Durkheim claiming that deviance is a necessary element of social organizations that serve several important functions. That right there is very Durkheim. Know it. You know, deviance contributes to solidarity by enhancing our sense of right and wrong, right? Somewhat preventing that anomie, which is another good term to know, the state of confusion that occurs when people lose sight of shared rules and values that give order and meaning to their life. Like, we know that we've got these rules, and then when those rules are obstructed or watered down, or we don't respond to them, you know, then we feel alone and people feel disconnected and people feel a state of confusion. And maybe an example of this would be suicide. And of course, what's that matter to us in the United States? Well, I do believe we have the highest suicide rate in the world. And not as a way, because I love this country, love my society, my culture and all that, but I'm critically thinking of it. And we don't want to be number one in many of the categories that we are number one in. That is, you know, that is actually maybe means that we're not number one in those ways. So suicide, certainly something that we can do more about. Another bit of a functionalist explanation of deviance. Deviance, right, from the system's point of view, it's this abnormality that needs to be eliminated. Right? I mean, a certain amount is functional and helps us clarify, but if it's too deviant, then we must remove it from the system, or the system will not function, right? Or function in the way that it is expected to. So again, enhancing that sense of solidarity, Durkheim's idea, the difference between right and wrong, you know, people really, really, really rely on that. The US is not in the top 10. Well, I'll have to look at that. I'm pretty sure we are. But I don't have time quite right now for that, but we'll check that out. Maybe I won't put it on anybody else. I'll go look at that. So Merton, another name that you want to know, people share a common understanding of goals and a legitimate mean for achieving these goals. So know Merton and know that he's associated with strain theory, meaning, look, we have an understanding of what you do for money, right? It's likely not robbing banks like Bonnie and Clyde. Likely, the way to do it is to go work someplace and you put in a certain number of hours and then you're paid for a certain number of hours and you can kind of calculate that and then you'll have to give some to the government. But strain theory comes in here when there's a gap between the cultural goals for success and the means available to achieve those goals. When there is more of a gap, right, more of that cognitive dissonance, then rates of deviant, according to strain theory, will be higher. You know, if everybody feels like they have to have an Apple phone that costs whatever, $500 or $1,000 or whatever that might be, I mean, then not everybody can achieve that. If everybody's supposed to have a brand new vehicle, not everybody can achieve that. If everybody's supposed to live, I mean, again, fashion things that are expensive, not everybody can achieve those. We know how to do it, but when there's that gap between the availability, and now, come on, I think people in Congress, there are people in Congress that have voted down minimum wage increases 15 times while voting 7 or 8 times or 6 or 7 or 8 times to increase their own wages as senators, right? So if the longer that takes place, the longer people struggle in poverty, from a functionalist standpoint, the more deviance there's gonna be, because you're saying this is what you can attain, but you're not legitimately making that possible for people. They're gonna figure out their way to do it, right? I mean, I guess, and I know this, you know, people share a common understanding of the goals, legitimate means for achieving them. Could we use strain theory here with that party the other night at CU? You know, you're supposed to, if you're going to get together, it's only so many people. It should be masked, but people haven't had the means to do that. I don't know. And then all of a sudden you've got some really, really big incident that's out of control that likely normally wouldn't be. Anyway, so Merton, people share a common understanding of the goals and legitimate means for achieving those goals. Absolutely. And oops, sorry, get back to here. And so when that gap exists, deviance will be high. So we just have another idea here. So no Merton, no Durkheim. Know that those names are associated with functionalist perspectives of deviance. All right, so a couple more through functionalism or functionalist perspective. Opportunity theory and control theory. I mean, think about it, right? This was maybe around 10 years ago when the economy took a big dip and home prices, like, you know, there was a dip down, and I think what was happening is people who were considered to be experts on Wall Street lost almost half of this country's accumulated wealth in a very, very, very short amount of time. And they were just like, well, it was gone. And of course, what people were doing, there's a lot of people arrested as the types of loans they were giving, and what insiders were doing on Wall Street. Well, look, that's like if you work a job and you work for tips or you work at a place, you might steal like 20 bucks or 50 bucks or $100 out of the register. Opportunity theory is going to say that's because you have opportunity to do so. Therefore, how could we lose that many billions of dollars? How could that financial crash happen? Well, people that were stealing had access and opportunity to do so, but in the billions of dollars, right? So why would those people do that? Well, because, you know, they could slip a little at a time, tens of thousands of dollars into an account. That's what they have access to. Not many people here have access to the others. So opportunity theory would say, it's not just your motivation, but, you know, what are your surroundings? What's your opportunity to do so? So deviance arises from social bonds or connections to others. Control theory, right? Strong bonds with those who disapprove of deviance prevents deviant behaviors, according to control theory. If you've got friends and somebody says, hey, let's sneak into Hughes Stadium and cut down a Christmas tree and take it back to our place, which somebody did years and years and years ago, and your friends say, yeah, because they don't disapprove of that behavior, you know, it gets to this stronger willingness to conform. Or if people are like, no, that sounds like a bad idea, it's not that way. So those who lack strong social bonds don't necessarily fear the same consequences of deviance because they don't have that connection through control theory, right? So somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer or a serial killer, people that talk to very few people, that don't have strong social bonds, those people, they don't even oftentimes fear or understand the consequences of their actions or of that deviance because they're just not connected to people enough to understand that, their place in it. So couple more of these things that I feel are important as well in this chapter on deviance. So deviant, why not? I made this slide a couple years ago. What we realized is that, of course, you know, we've seen a lot since the riots at the Capitol about looking at this and what's more deviant. And now that Colin Kaepernick is still out of a job as an individual, but we know, and people chimed in, and BLM was an important movement that was somewhat started. So if we look at this from like, what's more deviant, right? Kneels, protests measurable inequalities and police violence and injustice by kneeling, right? He's blacklisted. We could talk about that on its own, but from the NFL, some people could call him a paid protester. You're paid to kneel and disrespect. Now, we also understand in this context that the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem really wasn't done for a long time in stadiums until they made a deal, I believe, with the military and things like that to drum up patriotism, which is right now, you know, we're not making a value judgment on, but it wasn't something that was always taking place. People put a lot of emphasis on that and try and say, this is a really, really deviant thing. And I think around that time, shortly after that, the vice president showed up at a Colts game. I think it cost about $250,000 of taxpayers' money. He posted a picture, which wasn't even from that game, berating black athletes for exercising the same freedom as he does, i.e. meaning he's now a paid protester because he's on government dollars. So again, this is why I think that it's important that we look at it from all sides. Both of these things could be seen as deviant, right? How do we see one is more deviant than the other? Power, right? Power and access, and who is saying it's deviant, and how do they get that message across? And what's that mean? I mean, some people would argue that 200 or 300 years of statistically measurable oppression is definitely more deviant. And some people would say, no, interrupting, I don't know, a game with doing something different, you know, whatever, expressing yourself in that way, that's not the right place or time. So we get around to this question, which is who decides this? I mean, who really has that power and access, and how does that decision reflect the norms and values of a culture, right? Or do those people reflect those norms and values? You know, it should be known that, you know, the greater culture, meaning dominant culture, they didn't like it when Martin Luther King would kneel either. And so dominant culture usually sees those that have worked to oppress or that they've worked to oppress as deviant when those folks are trying to gain equal rights. And absolutely that does not mean that they are deviant, right? Many times the oppressors are far more deviant in their resistance to strong cultural values, meaning, did Pepe Le Pew really get canceled, or is a character who is about the rapiest, non-consensual character ever? Have we moved past that culturally? Yes, that's what happened. Our values are no longer the values of 20, 30, or 40 years ago that might allow for that. It's not that somebody's waving a liberal flag trying to cancel Pepe Le Pew or Dr. Seuss. And if we've seen anything about the Dr. Seuss books that were canceled or that are no longer in print, they're extremely racist. And there are images in each one of them that are undeniably racist. And that's not because of liberal decisions in the year 2021. That's because we have a collective agreement as a culture that Nazis aren't very fine people, right? Because that wasn't that long ago. So that kind of transitions or segues us into deviance and conflict. So subcultural theory and class dominant theory. And I do have to move kind of fast to get this all in today, but you also have access to my other, you know, lectures that, you know, aren't necessarily rushed. Anyway, same with Aunt Jemima. People get so upset. Yeah, you know, not allowing people to continue racist or sexist stereotypes is not canceling. I honestly have no idea what cancel culture is, and I don't think that anybody else does either. I think that that's kind of like saying welfare state. Everybody gets welfare. Like Texas is getting $16 billion of it. They're not returning that check. There's a whole lot of people that hate the quote welfare state, and they're not returning their COVID checks either, their relief checks either, right? So again, from a certain point of view. So subcultural theory, various segments of the population have conflicting interests. What is criminal or deviant for some is the norm for others. I mean, and sometimes the people who have made criminality more normalized are the people that actually have the power to decide what's deviant. What? Yeah. We don't always know that. And again, these are very connected. Class dominant theory. Dominant class interests determine what is labeled deviant or criminal, meaning that the system itself is never going to, why look at economic inequality? Honestly, like I just said, it's so deviant to not raise the minimum wage for decades and decades and decades and normalize it somehow is that poor people don't want to work. When in fact, from this position and from this point of view, it's clear to see why those people would give themselves raises and not other people. You don't want to have the system that benefits you, that was made by you, be a detriment to you, right? Capitalism is going to require labor, private property, a regulated marketplace. And we have to understand, as we will when I get into the chapter on stratification, every culture, not just the United States, but every culture builds in some sort of inequality, not only builds it into their system, but justifies it as fair and like normal. And this is the way it should be. So I think that, if we're looking at class dominant theory and we're looking at what's happening with bigger and bigger and bigger gaps between those that have and those that have not, those that are living check to check, those that are food insecure, and the very small percentage of people that have a lot, I think that those laws are consistently written to benefit those folks. And particularly when we look at it from this, and then we could look at the data that suggests that those gaps are increasing, what that means. If it wasn't that way, if there wasn't some credit to this notion, we would see the upper class or the people that are in the political class, start to even out the playing field in ways, or try to do so with that. But that's not something that we always see, right? And of course, that makes sense from a functionalist point of view. Cannabis. Oh my goodness. How bad can a good girl get? She should have said no, but she didn't. Stay up or stay dumb. Is the Mexican nation locoed by a peculiar weed? And maybe my favorite here, beware. Oh, did I catch you by surprise? I'm so sorry. Young and old people in all walks of life. This may be handed to you. It contains the killer drug marijuana, a powerful narcotic in which lurks murder, insanity, death. I can't even get worked up about this. It's so ridiculous, but I love this. Dope peddlers are shrewd. They may put some of this drug in your tea or in the, can't read that right now, or in the tobacco cigarette. Wow. Are we all properly scared now? Dope peddlers are shrewd in that they don't show up when you want them to and make you wait all afternoon. That's why people go to dispensaries. They might not be as shrewd. So if we're looking at cannabis as deviant, I did ask the class, let me stop the share. And I did because I was thinking about something that in my own lifetime, is considered very, very, or has been considered very, very deviant, and now has changed quite a bit. And in some places, not much at all. So is cannabis deviant? 47 people responded. 13 people said yes. 33 said no. And one person said C. Well, so why? Why or why not? As we look at deviance, how could we consider cannabis deviant? Why might it not be considered deviant? What do you think?
So I'm the one person that said C, and I said it kind of as like a kind of thing. Like it could be considered deviant in some ways, but not others. Like if you're using it for medical reasons, like legitimate medical reasons, I don't think that's deviant. Or if you're using it just to have a little bit of fun, I don't think that's deviant. But if you're using it excessively, I think that's when it becomes deviant.
All right. So perhaps it's like at a certain volume of use. Good. Why else deviant or not deviant, or how else deviant or not deviant?
I think the culture that you're into depends, because like I'm from Hawaii, and over there it's just so normalized. Like people just smoke on the beach and stuff, and the cops don't really care as much about it. So it's not really seen as deviant there. But then if you go to some place where it's just like very, like nobody smokes, it's very like, it really just depends on where you are.
I mean, I never taught college in Illinois. I've always taught out here. But I will say this. it's changed a lot on campus. It's changed to where last semester or last year before everything shut down, spring semester, I'm standing in Clark outside my class and there's a guy hitting his vape pen, right? Like I'm standing here and he's right here. And I was like, wow. Like it went from like hiding it to like maybe you smelled it once in a while to definitely outside to whatever the vaping thing is where people have cherry juice and they exhale giant clouds of smoke because they think it makes them look cool when it really doesn't. And then all the way to smoking inside the building right before you go into class, right next to the professor. So yeah, I would say that in ways I could say that that's ridiculously normal for Colorado. And also I don't know that I'd see that in Freeport, Illinois. And of course, a college campus is different than the surrounding community as well. Good. Okay. Why else? I mean, why did cannabis go from being murderously deviant, insanity causing, or to this? Right. It's just one of those pieces where we look at the fact that culture's never stagnant, right? It's gonna change. And some people wait till that changes, and some people are engaged in like that deviant behavior that's illegal because they don't see it as deviant, even if it is against the law, right? You know, a lot of that we can see. Okay, so let me go back here, do a screen share again. So conflict perspective, structural contradiction theory, conflicts generated by fundamental contradictions in the structures of society produce laws defining certain acts as deviant or criminal. So societies with the greatest gap between what people earn or what they're encouraged to earn. See, again, it's a bit like that other piece where you've got that, you know, the gap in what you think you should have, you know, and what people tell you or society tells you you should have and what you can actually attain. And again, these contradictions can really be seen in the war on drugs, where it's like really illegal in Nebraska, but now it's legal in Illinois. Who would have thought? Now it's illegal, but now it's legal in Colorado. If you were to go several years ago to Nevada, prostitution and gambling is illegal or is legal, while cannabis, a very small amount, used to be able to get you like a felony almost immediately. What? There? So structural contradiction theory, right? Certain laws apply in certain places and not in others. And there's just all sorts of contradictions in the structure of how society produces laws and who we actually enforce the laws with. Look at this summer, the reaction, you know, to the BLM folks standing around again, or the Capitol riot. You know, the response by police was much different. What are the contradicting messages? How do we do policing? What does profiling look like? I mean, it really, you could apply this to anything, you know, across the board. So I often ask this question, deviant or not? So is this guy deviant or not? On the left. And Connor exposes it right away. Now, normally, so let me go back in time, and I've got my data from a different semester, okay? Normally, when I would ask this question, I've got 150 people answering here, and I've got 99 people. No, hold on. Ooh, wrong, sorry. 150 people, 125 saying not deviant, right? So the question is, I mean, now you might know who that person is, okay? But still, what makes us react that way, right? Like, what makes us say that this guy's not deviant? He looks nice, he's got a belt on, his shirt's tucked in, they're washing dishes in the 70s. I mean, turtlenecks, right? You know, so much so that 3/4 of my class, 75, 80% and above, have been saying for years, not deviant. You know, and we can look at all sorts of folks, people of differing abilities, folks labeled as deviant because of their weight, because of their size, because they have a home or they own a home or they don't. You know, many people, like a decent enough percentage of people, choose to be homeless. And it's not a scenario where it's a drug and alcohol scenario. It's not a scenario where it's a down and out Skid Row scenario. And maybe pigment, lack of pigment in your skin. So again, I've been talking about deviance and how it's not necessarily just what you choose. It can be a state of being or a condition, right? Then let me come back to this. So remember me? Hi, remember me? I'm the happy guy, looking guy in the photo. I look really normal. I could be your friend, neighbor, or teacher, but I'm not. My name is Ted Bundy. You might know me. I killed more than 20 women. Do I still look normal to you? So I just wanted to circle back around to this, and I always do, because what does this really say about the way that we identify deviance and the messages and who and where it comes from? You know, take something like autism or epilepsy. Previous generations wrote people like that off, abused people like that. We know that these people are genius. We know that these people have a lot to contribute. Temple Grandin. And so, you know, when we see people and we make an instant judgment, what's it say about us? What's it say about society? And what does it say, most importantly, about how we come to identify deviance? You know, why sometimes the simplest thing can be deviant, somebody with a wrong side of an ear piercing or a tattoo that you can see, and somebody who's a serial killer, you'd have no idea, and you'd make that judgment right away. So, you know, how we react or identify to deviance is important. So lastly, symbolic interaction in deviance looks at labeling theory. Labeling theory is one of the most important theories. I do believe it will be on the exam. The main contribution of symbolic interaction is labeling theory, and really deviance or conformity result not from what people do, but how others respond, right? Like, it's not necessarily that action, it's how the people around you respond. I mean, when you know, when you're little and you interrupt your parents, or you yell or you cuss at your parents, do they blow it off? Are there repercussions? When you skip school, as a teacher, like, no problem? Are there repercussions? You know, what are the responses to those actions? And of course, looking at, you know, who you socialize with and how that impacts that is a big part of it as well. Okay. Hold on back here. Labeling theory, labeling theory is the product of the labels that people attach to certain types of behavior. So we know, like many things like race, deviance is also socially constructed. So know the difference between primary and secondary deviance, right? Primary deviance occurs at the moment an activity is labeled as deviance by others. Secondary, when a person labels, even accepts that label as part of his or her identity and begins to act in conformity with that label. You know, when is it something that's just like, oh, you had too many beers tonight? And when is it you're a problem drinker, or you're the person that's always going to be partying last, that's going to have to be taken home, that has the most trouble when they, you know, encounter alcohol and that kind of thing? Obviously, we already know the impact that it makes on people, that other people make on people's decisions. We've talked about that and that impact with socialization. So another way to say this might be primary deviance is norm violations that, you know, happen and don't really change people's self-concept, you know. And secondary deviance, when people make something of another's deviant. Like, at one point, we're all just standing around having a beer. A few months later, it's all of us identifying that that person, even though we're standing around having a beer, might have a real problem, right? And then, of course, we get into, we're going to be getting into like formal deviance or sanctions or criminal law, which I said was one of the other aspects of that. So differential association theory, deviant and criminal behavior result from associating with people and attitudes favorable to deviant or criminal behavior. If you hang out with people that are cool with stealing stuff, you know, you're probably going to end up stealing stuff. The greater you have an association with those people, the greater likelihood that behavior will be deviant. And not just like out of the back of Best Buy or at your workplace waiting tables. Again, the people doing the stealing or doing the deviant things might be stealing hundreds of millions of dollars, and that becomes the norm in a group of folks on Wall Street that have that. So it's like, this isn't a blue collar, white collar piece. This is just, who are you associating with? What is the frequency, the intensity, the length, and the chronology of those relationships? This is the very reason that your parents may have said, we do not want you to hang out with that crew, right? And then maybe you said you're right, or maybe you decided to hang out with that crew. And then, you know, that doesn't mean you're going to steal something, but But according to this, certainly more criminal behavior the more you hang out with people that are okay with that, that wouldn't stand up and stand out and say something about it. So how do we decide what is deviant and what is not? Obviously, that's what I keep saying. Who defines deviant? Do we all have an equal say in what constitutes deviance? No. Oh my gosh, some of the most deviant people are people that make the laws, are people that decide on a greater scale what is deviant and what's not. And then oftentimes they're found, oh, I think of the pastor down in Colorado Springs, that big mega church, and, you know, what was his name? I can't remember, but it was a big piece, you know, anti-gay, 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 anti-drug, boom. But when those messages come from powerful people, laws can be changed. Entire like generations of these things can shift. I mean, letting fossil fuel companies, right, decide laws by giving contributions about the environment, I think is extremely deviant, but I don't have a say in that. I don't make those policies. I don't have a media machine to normalize that, right? So society generally attempts to control and regulate the behavior of your members, right? I mean, social control, and if we come back here to social control, I'm not sure if that's in this particular lecture yet or not, but it's a very real thing. That's what that is. Society's attempt to control your thoughts and behaviors. Oh, Jason, that sounds conspiratorial. No, that's just advertising. That's controlling your thoughts, right? Charmin, I need Charmin. I need an Apple, it's the best computer. Whatever, right? So, of course, we also have medicalization of deviance. Famous people stand out in my mind, like Mel Gibson, who said some really horrific anti-Semitic things and then blamed it on the fact that he was an alcoholic. So that's the medicalization of deviance piece. No, it wasn't really me. It was the medical condition I have. I'm an alcoholic. And it's a way to sort of transform moral and legal deviance into a medical condition, right? So, of course, you know, people look at all sorts of things, how people respond to that. Is that person famous? Do we let them off the hook? Is there shared outrage? What's the personal competence of that person? And here we go. So social control, sort of, I think, the last piece here as we wrap up, which would be, you know, parents, teachers, and peers. That's kind of informal stuff. Detentions, your friends saying, Jason, that's just not you should not be doing that. That's not cool. That's not helping anybody. Oh, thank you. You know, that was my generation, sort of. You knew somebody was your friend if they told you something you didn't like, you know, because they were friend enough to say that. Instead of avoiding it. Of course, once we get into formal social control, you're talking about the criminal justice system, which can include formal response by the police, getting involved in the courts, prison officials, talking about alleged law violations and things like that, right? So know this definition. It should be on the exam. Efforts to ensure conformity to a norm or set of norms, and your attempt, like I said, to control your thoughts, behavior, and action. And we do talk all the time about social power. What is that? This is what I like. If I talk about power and access, know the definition of power. The ability to, well, Jason, when you say that, what's that mean? Well, the ability to exercise social control, you know? And nowadays, things like that come from like a Twitter platform, right? And it's I've got X number of followers, you know? So now I'm gonna try and say this, and does that help me have the ability to greater sort of impact social control, that power? So informal, normal people don't do that, go about it in a different way. Could you put more effort into it? And it can be ignored. And certainly, like I said before, when our bonds to other people are sort of weakened, that's when, you know, maybe we see more of that. And then formal social control, criminal justice system, police and courts, authority figures, schools, laws, regulations. And you can have them both together. I've got a drug dealer who gets arrested and is also shunned by their neighbors. You know, now you've got the status. You've been arrested. Now it's informal and formal social control. You know, yeah. So think about it. Getting teased by friends, informal, being given attention, informal, your neighbors avoiding you, informal, getting arrested, formal, getting expelled from your church, maybe more formal, having your paycheck garnished by the government, that's formal, right? So just an idea there. So, deviance exists in opposition to those who try and control it. So, meaning the powerful oftentimes can resist labels of being deviant. How many times are some famous actors or actresses arrested with DUIs time and time and time again? It would normally land people in jail. It only maybe improves the popularity of some people sometimes. Sometimes people can be very deviant and still resist those labels. And that has to do with social power, right? So, I mean, from this perspective, few really, if anything, are inherently deviant. I mean, people become, or things become deviant, or people become deviant as others define them that way. So it's this struggle and this interplay for power, right? And the ability to control others, and who can define something as deviant. Again, I think it's really interesting that Congress for years and years and years failed knowingly to increase gender pay or pay based on gender. You know, how could they possibly do that and ever expect to be elected based on percentages, based on, you know, women voters, based on people who identify with voters and gender issues and non-discriminatory ways. So, well, those people might not have a proportionate share of the power. They might have more access to outlets to get that label or that message across that someone, and I guess I use this as that, you know, Colin Kaepernick is deviant, so deviant. And I really don't know how good he is as a quarterback or not. Not that great, doesn't matter. Had a job in the NFL. Nobody will touch him years later. He's been labeled as deviant. Now, I'm not boo-hooing for people that make millions and millions of dollars or not, but it's just an example of ways that people can be publicly sort of cast as deviant or not. I mean, again, you could look right here with students at this school, put on blackface, stand there and say Wakanda. What is the school's response? Do they get expelled? Are they, you know, are they sanctioned in any way? Or does the school send another email around that says, we really, really, really support you. We really support diversity. And it's not, right? So how do powerful exercise social control and deviance? The winners are usually the majority, usually people that are considered normal, and that normalcy is redefined by defining, you know, who and what is normal or what's not normal. I mean, we could just look at so many things now, right? I mean, mostly for the most part, public bathrooms, or at least in the large part, and I think about any porta potty you've ever entered, that's a transgender bathroom. That is a bathroom that is open to absolutely anybody. Start giving people rights that don't have rights, that deserve them, and some measure of redefinition, and suddenly, you know, you find the system really rallying against those folks, and several laws just within the last, or several attempts at writing discriminatory legislation just in the last, you know, several weeks. So losers in this, usually the less powerful people, the minority, those that get labeled as deviant, weird, depraved, sick, immoral, unnatural, whatever that might be. And of course, again, the people doing the deviance defining, not always the ones we should be taking that advice from, right? And what are the goals of social? Because, you know, we know that once you get into our total institution, our prison thing here in this country, you know, we do a lot with punishment and sanction. We don't do a lot with rehabilitation. And we know that we need to put money into rehabilitation. We know that we need to put money into mitigation ahead of time to deter people. But most of our money in the criminal justice system goes into punishment, goes into sanction, you know, and that suppression or reduction of deviance is what you say. Now, depending, right, there might be an increase in deviance. I mean, think about that. The police show up in Boulder. We say you've got to be wearing masks and you've got to be dispersing this gathering, and that might not go over well. So you might see an increase in deviance, depending on how people or individual groups. And that's that piece, right, from the chapter on groups. We were just a category, but now all of a sudden we're a group, right? Or we've got a tide or connection, or we're rebelling, or we're protesting, whatever that might be. Okay. Applying theory, key points in review, you know, just a little way to sum it up here at the end, right? Deviance can mean so many things, but why do we make these judgments? How do we make these judgments, and what impact do they have on how we see deviance? There are so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people locked up for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years, their whole life for cannabis. It's legal in many places now. What happens to those people when we redefine deviance? You know, so many aspects of this that I find interesting because it's consistently changing, consistently being redefined. You could really pick any day of the week and we could just look at something and break down, is it deviant, is it not? How is that, you know, anyway. All right, any questions about this chapter, deviance? Any of this? Cha-cha-cha. Anything? No? All right. I'll wait for another second here. Just kind of reading some of these things. I actually told Julie, I can't always like read the comments, but sometimes I'm lecturing and I do because I think that we like, it's a kind of an element to class I like. People are used to like responding online to things. So when people respond, this whole, one does not simply cuss at one's parents and live, you know, things like that are humorous. And if we've got a little bit of that going on in the background or people providing links for each other, I actually really like this. It would be cool if you could incorporate that once we get back into the classroom, which, you know, I hope to do that. I hope to get back to my job in the classroom. I'm not sure about that. Julie was just calling about vaccination today. She's a frontline worker, you know, in a grocery store. So she's looking to do that. Wow, any questions, any concerns about anything? Anything, anybody? Nothing? Really? Have we hit the halfway hill where it's just like lifting a thought is difficult. I'm fine. I'm with you. I'm there. Yeah, I don't know. Nothing. All right. Excuse me. Okay. Did you say the thing about? No, I did not. I'm busily lecturing for the past 50 minutes, but I could go look that up for sure. I do know that we have a very serious problem with suicide in this country. And if we're not cracking the top 10, that's a good thing. And we're also nowhere near where we should be with suicide prevention and training and reach out and you know, safety nets for people and things like that too. So, all right. Well, I shall leave you with, what should I leave you with? I don't know. Here, I'll leave you with Huckle. He thought my lecture was this interesting today. Go figure. Let me run down my new rundown. Be good people, do good things, mask up, stay safe. You know I love you. Reach out if you need anything. Yes, the exam is open from Thursday until Saturday. Don't miss it. If you do miss it, if you black out the next 3 days and you wake up on Saturday at 12:30, don't ask me to open the exam. I'm not going to do it. It doesn't work that way. But if you miss an exam at that moment before you email me and you haven't missed an exam yet, you can retake that. So make sure you read the syllabus, know the rules of the game. Peace. Take care, everybody.